Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to stately Vaughn Manor, where it's Wednesday. That means it's Epic Comic Book Wednesday. Every Wednesday, I'll talk about a certain comic book, graphic novel, or comic book subject. Steve Donoghue over on his channel will talk about the same comic book, graphic novel, or comic book subject. It is our world's finest team up that we do once a week. And this week, we've got something really exciting. We're talking about a character that Roger and I both love, and that would be Hellboy. Roger and I both love Hellboy. So, my favorite comic book character is Superman, but right under Superman, there's Hellboy. I love this guy. I mean, look at him. He's awesome. He's always fighting monsters and Lovecraftian creatures and all kinds of other horrible things. He is also the world's greatest occult detective, the greatest supernatural investigator, who worked for a while for the BPRD, the Bureau of Paranormal Research and Defense. Great character created by Mike Mignola. And the story that we're going to be talking about today is a story called Wake the Devil, which was the second Hellboy series. The first Hellboy series was Seed of Destruction, which was really good. But that one was scripted, actually, by John Byrne. And the reason John Byrne did the scripting was because at the time of Seed of Destruction, Mike Mignola hadn't done any scripting for himself, really. He was an artist. And he came up with the plot and the story, but he didn't feel quite confident enough at the time to script it. So John Byrne, he did the script. And so that's why when you read Seed of Destruction, it reads a little bit differently as far as the character of Hellboy than the Hellboy that shows up in the rest of the series. Hellboy's unique voice and personality wasn't quite there in Seed of Destruction. Not that John Byrne got it wrong. This was just early days for Hellboy. So the art was a little different than the rest of the series, and the script and the sound of Hellboy himself was just a little bit off in Seed of Destruction. That all changed with Wake the Devil, however, which I have a couple ways. This is the Hellboy Omnibus Volume 1, and all of this is a fat trade paperback full of Hellboy stories. A couple of Hellboy's main series and a longer story are in this. It's also available, Wake the Devil is also available as a trade paperback. And this says Omnibus on it, but of course it's not like a DC or Marvel Omnibus, one of those big hardcover monstrosities that I love so much. Although, later on this year, I think it's in December, I could be wrong, but Dark Horse is coming out with a big monster book. I think it's literally called Monster Size Hellboy or something like that. I've already got it on pre-order, of course. Which is going to be an omnibus-style book that has a ton of Hellboy in it. So, of course, it's a must-buy, right? Even though I have all the stories that are going to be in that book, it doesn't matter. This has been read to death because Hellboy is very rereadable. And there are only so many Hellboy stories, unlike Superman or Batman or somebody that has billions of stories about them. There's only so much Hellboy. And Wake the Devil it's just a great Hellboy series, a great Hellboy story. So this is one way I have it. But I upgraded a while ago to this. This is the Hellboy Library Edition Volume 1. And the Library Edition has Seed of Destruction and Wake the Devil in it. So it has both of those series as well as a couple of other stories. A couple of really early Hellboy stories. And Hellboy, who was brought to Earth in an experiment conducted by Nazis and Rasputin. Hellboy's a weird series. Lots of crazy stuff happens in it. And this is from Seed of Destruction. There's Rasputin there. Rasputin, all he wants to do is completely cause a Holocaust on Earth by bringing down these Lovecraftian horrors. That's all he wants to do, and he keeps trying. But in this experiment, he brings to Earth Hellboy as a little baby. There's Hellboy there. And Hellboy shows up far away from Rasputin, and he's taken in by a bunch of U.S. soldiers because this happens during World War II, and there's a picture of all the soldiers there, and this old fellow there is the guy that looks after Hellboy, it's Professor Broom, right? And so he takes care of Hellboy as Hellboy grows up, and there's a great scene of them together. And that's one of the early scenes of Hellboy in this story. He looks a little different than he does later on. Like I say, the artwork is a little different, but you see that his distinctive style is here. And Mignola is interesting because he started off as an artist who did a lot of superhero stuff. And that really wasn't his thing, you know. He did a pretty good job, but because he's a really good artist. But his style didn't really fit superheroics. It fits this kind of thing perfectly. Kind of this supernatural horror adventure stuff. And the character of Hellboy is awesome. Because he's basically a working class guy. He's a demon, you know, from hell, who has a destiny that he keeps, that every supernatural creature throws in his face. But he fights against this destiny because he wants to be his own person. And he was raised on Earth by decent people. So he turns out to be a relatively decent guy, Hellboy. He seems to be virtually indestructible. I mean, he's just beaten to hell in Hellboy over and over again by monsters. But he's a durable guy. And he's extremely strong. I don't know quite how strong Hellboy is, but he seems like an awful strong guy. Strong, tough, perfect fella to fight monsters. You might be more familiar with Hellboy from the films. I think a lot of people are. And the first two Hellboy movies were actually pretty good, but they did make some changes which I found unnecessary. I remember that watching the movie. For one thing, in the film, Hellboy is kind of like an urban legend. In this comic book, Hellboy, everybody knows who Hellboy is. And for some reason, nobody raises an eyebrow whenever Hellboy shows up, even though he's this big, huge demon who looks like a big, huge demon. Everybody's like, oh, hey, how are you doing? You know, and nobody seems particularly surprised when Hellboy shows up, which is kind of cool, actually. And so the first series was good, but the second series, Wake the Devil, was really good. And we go to the second series now, which is written by Mike Mignola. And so here, Hellboy finds... Sorry about that. I was interrupted. Imagine that, Roger. Somebody interrupting me when I'm doing something very important, like making a comic book video that, you know, not many people are going to watch. But, you know, it's very important. Hellboy and Wake the Devil. So anyway, Wake the Devil starts off with a bang, and we have the Nazis who are back, the Nazis who were left over, who worked with Rasputin. Rasputin's gang is back. Rasputin looks to be gone. He seems to have been killed in Seed of Destruction. And we have all kinds of other supernatural antagonists in this. But one in particular was a vampire. And this vampire here, that's him right there. That guy's a vampire. He kind of starts the whole ball rolling. And that's what gets Hellboy and the Bureau of Paranormal Research and Defense into this story, is looking for this guy. And so Hellboy is looking for this vampire. In fact, a whole team is looking into the situation here. I don't want to give away actually too much of the plot, because it's actually kind of cool, and it involves a lot more than just the vampire. There's all kinds of stuff going on. I mean, all kinds of stuff going on in this book. I do want to share with you, however, probably one of the greatest scenes in all of Hellboy. And it's the scene that really made me realize how great this series was going to be. I read this series in order. So I had read Seed of Destruction, and I really liked it. But when I read Wake the Devil, that sealed the deal. Because Hellboy just seemed so cool in this series, where he's just this working class guy who's also a demon with a terrible future. And so you've got this scene here where they're in an airplane and they give Hellboy a jetpack. And Hellboy says, "Geez, Lloyd, I hate these goddamn things. Plug it, you. This is a new and improved model." And he shows it here, says, "That's the ignition switch right there. Roll your shoulders to turn and watch your tail. Target up," the pilot says. "Bombs away." The bomb being Hellboy. And so there goes Hellboy in this great scene. Click, click, click. He keeps trying to click the ignition switch, and wouldn't you know it, it's not working. And there he is, just on the way down. Click, 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 click. And he says, "New and improved my ass." And then in the next scene, kaboom! Ah! And he flies down to the castle just like this burning rocket. And there we have our villains there in the castle. And this is how this initial issue ends, with Hellboy's stone fist on fire, bursting through the ceiling. Sold. I was sold on this series right from that moment. I knew that I would never miss Hellboy after that. That Hellboy was a great, great comic book creation. Indeed, Hellboy is. He's just such a fantastic character. And this particular story is just full of great stuff. The artwork is amazing with the silhouettes and these big sections of ink black, and this it's just so cool. And I feel like he really had a grasp on Hellboy's world in this particular series. The artwork did continue to evolve, but right here, I think he just had such a great grasp of the character. Basically, he fights a ton of monsters in this series, a bunch of supernatural beings he goes up against. You see, his art is a bit reminiscent of Jack Kirby. I would say there's a lot of Jack Kirby in his artwork, but it's also so uniquely his own. And there are elements that are just so Mignola. I mean, other artists have been influenced by him to the point of almost cloning him at times. But you just can't do it because, I mean, this guy, there's nobody like this guy, Mignola. There's nobody who creates artwork quite in this way. And he is at his best, I think, on Hellboy. Hellboy is his masterpiece. I mean, the backgrounds and everything, it's all just so well done. Mignola is one of those artists who really knows what he can draw and what he can't. And he tends to write stories, and he said this in interviews and things, that he tends to write stories to focus on the things that he knows he can draw very well, as opposed to when he was working for DC Comics, for example, when he just had to draw whatever they told him to draw and just did the best that he could with it. With Hellboy, he was in complete creative control. So he was able to just do the stuff that he liked to do, and he could turn the artwork towards his strengths. And I think that helped develop his artwork and develop his style within this series. And as a scripter, as a writer, he was really good right away, I think. Mostly because he had such a good grasp of these characters. I mean, it is true that this initial series is one fight after the other, but it's all done so well. And there's just so much cool stuff in Hellboy. There's just so many great moments. I gotta watch that I don't spoil too much. But there's so many great moments in Hellboy, and in this story in particular. I mean, this story, Wake the Devil, I think, I think this was the first great Hellboy story. I thought Seed of Destruction was really, really good. But this second story, Wake the Devil, this is what sets Hellboy on his path, I think. And you get so much cool stuff in this story. A lot of the stuff that Mignola puts into his Hellboy stories are based on folklore and legends and just other stuff that he was really interested in. This particular library edition of Hellboy, as well as having those first two series, also has some early stories from Hellboy. I'll see if I could find those. Yeah, here they are at the end. We get one early story where Hellboy's fighting a giant dog, and that was pretty cool. But we get the next one where we get Mike Mignola drawing something that he really loves to draw, which are apes. He loves apes. Hellboy, you know, this is not the only time that he's going up against a big monster ape. So this library edition has those as well. And as well as this great sketchbook at the end. I think probably, I mean, the sketchbook at the end of this book has so much cool stuff in it that it kind of makes this book worth it on its own, because this book actually has a lot of cool extras in it at the end. I mean, it's very generous with its extras. So the library editions, what are there, 7 of them, maybe? They're great. And so if you're interested in Hellboy, they're expensive, but they're a good way to go. Especially if you're like me and you end up reading Hellboy over and over and over again, which I tend to do. Like I said, there's only so much Hellboy in the world, and I love it. And that's why this omnibus, I have the whole omnibus set. And they're just kind of beat up because I read these things over and over and over and over again. So there you go. You've got Hellboy, Seed of Destruction. No, not Seed of Destruction, Wake the Devil. You've got Hellboy, Wake the Devil. That was the second series that I just talked about. Yes, that's what I talked about. Hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to catch Steve Donoghue on his channel to see what he has to say about Hellboy. And I will catch you next time.